Hello, this is Christian Sullivan, and you're listening to the Sullivan Report. We have a very, very special guest. Former Queens East business agent, Philly Servider, will be here answering questions. We have a jam-packed interview, loaded, chock full of information. You'll definitely want to listen to this. Hello, this is Chris Sullivan, and I'm here with a very, very good friend of mine, somebody I look up to, Mr. Philly Servider. Philly, how are you?
How you doing, Chris? Thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm glad to have you here. I've waited a long time for this interview. What have you been up to, and how are you?
I haven't been up to much, and I'm surviving.
Okay. I haven't seen you since really the election, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about the election. What was that process going through the election? I know that it seemed to me like management and the union were working together to keep you out a lot of the garages.
Well, it's funny you mention that because the U.S. Department of Labor is actually looking into the UFT election because of the way that the city handles elections with the unions.
Right.
They like who they have, and they don't want anybody else in there, so they work hand in hand with the regimes that are in there. After I posted what I was going to do when I started, all of a sudden they came out with rules. But for other elections in the past, I never seen any rules because nobody ever ran against the union or they were so small. But all of a sudden, when I came out, within a week they had a copy of the rules. They also had illegal, I would say, illegal monitoring of me, where I was and what I was doing. Because wherever I showed up, whatever the location I showed up in to speak, they had to immediately notify downtown headquarters, and then the bosses would somehow notify the union hall, because somebody from the union hall would always show up, or they'd get somebody to try to stop me from talking. You know, so that we would just say it's illegal surveillance wherever I went. Also, they only let me speak in certain areas, which would be the lunchroom or the locker room, which everybody knows. Everybody hangs out by roll call, where they do the operations board before and at the end of work. And what happens in the lunchroom or locker room? No witnesses. So if people roll up on you, they try to intimidate you to shut you down, because then management can't witness anything. They also tried to keep me from going into certain locations and told me I was trespassing, which I told them, well, you might as well call the cops and have me arrested. Up in the Bronx, they had the nerve to tell me outside 10, 11, and 12, they told me I was they wouldn't let me in on property the first week. They told me I was standing outside on the sidewalk. They were going to have me arrested for trespass. And I go, it's a public sidewalk. What are you talking about?
Wow.
You know, so I can go on and on and on. But yet, without having a contract for almost, I believe it was maybe 2 years at the time, maybe even going on 3.
Right.
The executive board never went out and did any roll calls anywhere. But all of a sudden, when I came out to run, they were allowed to do roll calls wherever they want, go past the starting times, 6 o'clock, hold up roll call, and the guys get out to work, and no problems.
Right.
Put up signs. But wherever I went, they shut me down. I couldn't speak at roll calls. Bosses threatened me numerous times to have me arrested, to take me off their property. They're not going to let me talk. You know, everywhere I went.
Now, how is that fair in America, where you're supposed to vote for your representation in the union, and they're threatening you every time you go to a garage just to speak to the men? You're not trying to incite anything. You're just basically trying to tell them your platform, what you believe, what you think is going on, and then they come along and they threaten you.
It's not America. It's a corrupt system. Management and the union are in collusion together, so management could do what they want and the union can do what they want. I mean, the whole system's corrupt. Think about it. If you take my union dues and you give them to politicians that run for office,
right, are
those politicians ever going to look into any wrongdoing in that union? Whether it be the control of the city of New York,
right,
Department of Investigation, who the commissioner is appointed by the mayor, who the union happens to give money to, the New York State Attorney General, he takes money from the unions, the governor takes money from the unions. There's really nowhere to turn. The whole system is backwards because they all got their hand in the pot. The comptroller for the state of New York, another one, takes money from the unions. So where do you go?
I don't know. I've been trying to find myself. somebody to go to that could help me with these trucks, because these emissions are really dangerous with the dangerous soot and fumes that, they tell you that secondhand smoke is bad for you. Meanwhile, you're ingesting all this soot and smoke because these DPF systems are meant for trucks that go 60 miles an hour and burn at high temperatures. These are garbage trucks that basically idle all day, going from house to house collection. And all the soot and all the exhaust backs up into the engine, and it backs up into the system. That's why you see nothing but black on the sides of the top of the truck. So we're breathing that in. What are the long-term effects of that? What are even the, 5 years from now, what are people, are they going to start getting sick, having health problems with lungs and, breathing issues?
Well, in Europe, they've done studies, and they call it the fine particles, diesel exhaust. There's a name for it. Diesel exhaust particles is what it comes down to.
Right.
And they're talking about how you actually breathe that in. It causes asthma and lung disease over periods of time.
Right.
And those trucks with the DEF, if they're not driving on the highway and blowing out and cleaning out, they're doing exactly what you said. You're breathing into them. They're doing more harm than good.
Right.
They sound good.
Right.
To have them, but they're not helping.
Right.
They'd be better off going to a natural gas combustible truck.
Yeah. Absolutely. And now what happens is you park these trucks in a garage where they don't have adequate ventilation and filtration systems like Q14. They put in a nice filtration system because it's a new building. These buildings, that I work in, like Q8, Q10, Q12, and I'm sure all over the city, they don't have adequate ventilation. And I talked to my business agent, Patty Quinn, and you know what he tells me? Well, what do you want me to do about it?
Well, there's two things funny about that. Q14 parks most of their trucks outside.
Right, exactly.
They don't even park them inside.
Right.
The districts that park their trucks inside that are lined up to go out, those would need those filtration systems. So for having trucks parked outside, what good is that filtration system there? I think they got this one backwards again.
Right. Absolutely.
It's horrible. And they say you're supposed to start one truck at a time, one row at a time, pull out one row at a time. You know what happens.
None of that ever happens.
And nobody's there to supervise it.
Right.
Back when I came on, you had a couple of garage foremen in some locations. So one would be out on the floor directing people what to do, and one would be doing the paperwork inside. But you don't even have that anymore.
Right.
It's very far in between. Getting back on well, we'll touch on safety later because there's a lot of other safety issues.
Okay, sounds good. One of the other things I wanted to talk about with the election was, I know you tried very hard to get it out there about how the union works, and I know you worked down there for years. Could you tell us what it's like working down in the union hall, and what it's like being a business agent down in the union, working for Harry Nespoli?
It's somewhat comical if I look back at it now, looking in retrospect, because I went down there as a shop steward.
Right.
I had fist fights on the garage floors over many things, over not destroying the job and letting the job go down the toilet, protecting the job, so it'd be here for everybody else. When I first became a shop steward, when I first got on the job, it was everybody would be running dump 7 o'clock in the morning. In some locations, the dump was right outside our door.
Right.
But after about 4 years on the job, they says, you guys are getting done too early, and they extended the routes. So then we pretty much all made an agreement we would dump after lunch to protect the job. Why would you run down the street to get more work?
Right.
So I stayed out for a very long time on my route to make sure it was dumped after lunch. Took my breaks, went to the meeting points, which don't exist anymore because they're supposed to have meeting points for break, and they don't exist no more. And I worked my way up from a spokesman on the night shift, 4 to 12. During the first layoffs when I was on the job, I think it was 1990, right. Whatever assignment I had, it took me all night to get some of that done. Dump a truck around the corner, if they were lucky, if I got one truck out of me, because at break time I got off, lunchtime I got off, got back on the line, got back off at break time. So they might have got one dump out of me because there was guys that laid off at home.
Right.
So that's where I started my thing, because I only missed by maybe 500 guys that being laid off.
Right.
But I knew those guys at home were important. And then, like I said, they extended the routes. I became the night spokesman. From there, I ran and I became a shop steward on the day line, right in the middle of, or the beginning of the route extensions when they cut all those trucks.
Right.
And there was a lot of guys that were just looking to do their time. They're almost done, and they didn't care about the future of the job.
Right.
So I spent some time rolling around the garage floor with different people, and more than once with some of the same people. That's just who I was, I had to do what I had to do. So now, being a shop steward, advocating for dumping after lunch, and protecting the job, and not letting management take trucks, and whatever productivity program came up, there were some changes after 9/11. A lot of guys in the union hall retired, and the guy I replaced, Angel DiPietro, he was moving up the chain to become Secretary Treasurer. So I was interviewed by Pete Scalatis at the time, and Harry came in towards the end of the interview, and they basically interviewed me, and then they told me maybe a month later that I was going to get the position. And they brought me in, and I had to work on the phones in the union hall for 13 months because they were a little hesitant about me being out in the street because they knew the type of guy I was. It was a little wild.
Right.
They considered me like a wildcat type of guy.
Right.
And they were a little hesitant about letting me loose. So they wanted me, under their thumb for at least a year. So I worked the phones, and I would go in at 6:30 in the morning. I would stay there till 4 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and then one Saturday every 5 or 6 weeks. And I'd be on the phones, I'd be taking the phone calls and trying to help the guys out in the field that would call up with different issues. The funny thing about it, I realized when I first got there, most of the people, the business agents that worked there, it would be hard to get them to help whoever needed help. They weren't there. We were on a paging system at the time.
Right.
So you had to put the number in by hand, like you were in, the 1980s.
Right.
And plug in the union hall number, and you have to wait for them to call you back. And they wouldn't call you back, and it would take them forever because cell phones weren't that big at that time. But they had them.
Right.
Or they were supposed to be in a location.
Right.
And I seen what was going on. Nobody was showing up. Nobody was doing what they were doing. Who'd be still home? Who'd be fishing? They'd be anywhere but what they were supposed to be doing.
Right.
And it's just like, what's going on here? These people are paying money. And they used to even joke that they used to bury a guy up there on the phones. They used to say, he used to tell guys on the phone, screw you. We get your money no matter what. Live with it.
Wow.
And that was basically like the attitude. Nobody up there, I would say, I hope it snows a lot so the guys make money.
Right.
They'd be like, we hope it don't snow because that means more phone calls, more headaches around the clock.
How can they feel that way? They're off the street. They're making, 2 checks? How much does a business agent make about? I mean,
well, here's the thing. They were getting their city check, and they were getting a business agent was getting probably about $50,000 at the time, $55,000.
Right.
Plus expenses.
Wow.
But expenses were capped at like $800 a month, for your car and your fuel, and if you bought, stuff for the guys at labor management, which none of them did. I think I was the only dope that had labor management and bought coffee and donuts for the men.
So they get money
and bagels
for labor management meetings and.
Well, they get money for an expense account.
Okay.
How you choose to spend it is
Under
on
your
you.
discretion.
Like even me, if it was a 90-something degree day in a heat wave, I would load up my car with 2 coolers and water and bottles of water and ice and bring them out to the guys. Especially
I remember that.
When they would be out there, I'd use my own money, and that's what I would do. I'd make sure I'd show and see the guys at the morning, break time, lunchtime, afternoon break, and the end of the day. I made sure I was around almost all day, every day. I would come in at nighttime. This is when they let me out into the street a year later.
Right.
I would show up at nighttime for 4 o'clock roll calls. I would show up at 7 o'clock at night for 7 p.m. roll calls. I'd show up at 12 o'clock night for 12 o'clock roll calls. If there was a problem, I'd show up in the middle of the night. If guys were staying out because there was an issue going on, I'd meet them at break at 2 o'clock in the morning or 4:30 in the morning for lunch. And I would just go and show up because guess what? I was getting paid to represent you. So if you got to go through it, then I should be there with you.
Wow. Totally different philosophy from the guy we got now.
Totally different philosophy from everybody that's up there.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to work like that. That saying, checks for nothing, money for free?
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. That's what it comes to up there. So
and why does Harry allow that?
Status quo, because you know what? Because the membership, keep the membership in the dark,
Yeah.
The guys that weren't doing their jobs, the guys on their phones would protect them. Because I even when I was on the phone, I would never rat somebody out if they weren't doing their job.
Right.
It's still a street thing. You don't say nothing.
Right.
But he knew who was who and who was doing their job and who bullshitted about doing their job. They were all the best business agents when they were up there.
Yeah.
They used to make fun of me because I used to write down my weights of what my trucks did every week and week to week and month to month and year to year, so I knew what my tonnage was. for the productivity programs, collection and recycling.
Right.
And they used to say, Philly's doing his homework. And that would take me 2 or 3 hours every Friday morning to do all that paperwork. But I should know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Because this is how we get paid on productivity programs. So, you know what the problem is? A lot of these people never were in the same shoes as the guys that were working out in the street. Either they were clerks, GUs,
right,
easy pack tissue. Not that there's anything wrong with that stuff.
right.
There's only a couple of guys out there that actually loaded a truck.
Right.
Lot cleaning, Nick's and neighborhood intensive cleaning division. They were all only, I think even Harry almost loaded a truck. He was pretty much in AFF and lot cleaning his whole career.
Wow.
And what I heard from people in the past is he even had trouble getting to work. But he would have a problem when guys didn't show up to work.
Really?
Sanitation workers, yeah.
Why would there be such a double standard with him? I don't understand that.
Because I honestly believe, not only him, but all those guys up there, build in their head, they forget who they were, and they create who they think they are.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
You know, for me, unfortunately, I never forgot where I came from.
Absolutely.
And I
You're
know
always the best business agent ever.
And I know what it's like to be in the guy's shoes, especially when you're doing disciplinary command, and they say, it's only a day's pay. Only a day's pay. It's only a day's pay to the guy that's saying that, but to the guy that's losing that day's pay for his family or 2 days' pay, that's over bullshit. That's some money you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And when they went to the progressive penalty, when I first got in the street,
right,
and I would do discipline hearings, right? I would get almost reprimand, dismissed, reprimand. I'd get 2 or 3 reprimands for a guy at a time. It'd take a lot for a guy to lose a day's pay.
Right.
And I got copies of all my trials that I did, all right? And then they went to the progressive penalty system. Basically what it said is if you got 1 reprimand within a year, no matter what the next complaint is, you got to get a day. And if you get another complaint, for something different, not even the same thing,
right,
you got to get 2 days. And I go, I'm not putting up with that bullshit.
Right.
You're telling me if a guy has a lateness and he got a complaint, his second lateness, and you docked him, and it was his first complaint in a year, you're going to give him a reprimand. But now you're going to tell me a couple months later, somebody drives into him, safety thinks the accident could have been avoidable, they give him a complaint for an accident, and now you want to take a day's pay?
Well, that's definitely one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the complaints, because I think they're out of control with the complaint. I know I've been getting bogus complaints.
Well, okay, let me finish my thought.
Oh,
on
sure,
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a couple things with that. Personally, right, when they started that system, I think it was a way to generate money.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
They got to have a board somewhere that says we got to generate this many suspension days,
like a ticket quota,
to get this much money, to go towards the budget. Because you remember
and it lowers the pension.
Yeah, because now you're losing money. We'll get into that's a whole nother story. We'll get into. So now, if you take those penalties, right, and you add them up, and now the mayor tells the agencies you got to cut 3%.
Right.
How much are you banking on that disciplinary system to get to your 3%?
Absolutely.
There's definitely a savings there. Why would they let the same, and I mean this emphatically, the same animal bitch, Rita Brackeen, running the fucking disciplinary system down there?
She doesn't even see you. She doesn't even see you.
She's not even allowed to talk to the members no more because she's such a nasty bitch.
Wow.
And the lawyers don't even want any other members. So even if you go down for a regular conference, because it's not a trial, okay, you're not even allowed to go near it because they know how nasty she is. But yet nobody does nothing about it.
Right. All I could talk to is the lawyer, and the lawyer just sits there and says, well, she wants to, he already knew what she wanted to offer before I came in the room. And then he was like, oh, no, they wanted to offer you 10 days for bogus complaints,
Well, here's the thing. That's what comes off of the progressive system they started. So they write a bogus complaint, right? And before we even get to that, before they got to the complaint process, right? If there was a problem in a district with a supervisor and a sanitation worker or whatever, it was supposed to try to be worked out with the shop steward and the worker and the foreman, and then the business agent, the shop steward, the worker, the foreman, and the super, and maybe somebody from the borough.
Right.
They just got away from that whole process, and they just write complaints. Here, the 311 calls.
Right.
They would just write. Anybody can call up and say whatever they want, and they would write a complaint.
Right.
So here, I'll give you an example. I told you the guy was late once, right? What was the second thing I told you he did? An accident, right? So he's late.
Okay.
He had an accident. So now they want 1 day because it's his second complaint in a year. And somebody called up and made a bogus 311 call. Guess what? Now they want 2 days. Meanwhile, the bogus 311 call, or it could have been legit, was never investigated that day at that time with that foreman and that crew.
Right.
All right. The complaint usually comes down 3 weeks later, a month and a half later.
Mm-hmm.
The guys have no idea when it was done, but they just write the complaint. Just like the bogus seatbelt complaints they were writing for a long time. If they couldn't get a guy doing something wrong, they would phantomly see the guy not wearing a seatbelt when he was supposed to be wearing it.
Wow.
And they would write a complaint. But the best thing about that was we had a crew go to oath, a sanitation worker go to oath, a shop steward from Q7, Sheldon Doby.
Right.
And when they cross-examined the foreman, and the lawyer said to him, "How do you know sanitation worker Doby wasn't wearing a seatbelt?" And the foreman said, "Well, it's orange, and I didn't see the orange going across his chest." And Doby told the lawyer, "My seatbelt is black." And the older trucks, they were black. They weren't orange at the time. And they caught the supervisor writing basically a false complaint because he didn't even get close enough to see if he was wearing his seatbelt
And
or
then
not.
nothing happens.
And here's the best part. Sheldon Doby won that case, and the commissioner still gave him 5 days.
Wow.
And one of the problems, you asked me what it was like being in a union hall and where I am now. So think about this. They still give him 5 days. They catch the foreman line. They still give him 5 days. Harry says, Doby can work down at the union hall for 5 days. We'll pay him so he doesn't lose the week's pay. I was like, well, wait a minute. That's good. I like that. But how come we're not going after the department and the foreman for falsifying records?
Right. Why are you letting it slide?
Exactly. Because it just coincidentally he didn't finish his route that day. He didn't have a seatbelt on. And numerous guys that didn't finish their routes on different days didn't have their seatbelt on. Or they left a can in the street, which is another bullshit complaint they write. If I pick your can up in front of your house, I'm putting it right back where it was. If it blows over after I leave, it's not on me. Unless you tell me you see me not put the pail back.
Right.
But you want to write, that's another fictitious complaint that they write.
Right.
So now they got it in for you. They write the seatbelt, they write the can, they write this, they write that. So now you're saying these are all lies. So how do you defend yourself? Me as a business agent, I stopped doing borough command between the progressive penalty system. And
I remember that.
And when they would start doing the lies, between the progressive penalty system and these phantom complaints, I go, these guys don't have a fair shot here. I would call the lawyer all the time. I go, this is all bullshit. It's all fabricated. We bust them all the time.
And nothing is done about it. Why doesn't Harry care about that?
Well, and they would call Harry and say, Servider's not doing borough command. We have hundreds and hundreds of complaints here. And I would tell Harry, it's not. If I sit down with them and hear those complaints, the way this system is, then that's me condoning what they're doing.
Right.
That's me going along with whatever they're doing and saying it's okay. Well, you sit down and do them, and if you don't like them, they'll get sent downtown and let the lawyer handle it. Listen, the problem with letting the lawyer handle it is it doesn't always get handled the way it should be. He doesn't know firsthand what happened. I'll go down and handle it downtown and defend the guy, and I'll go to trials with the guy if I have to.
I know you would.
So now here's part two of the scenario. So now you got all these fictitious complaints. I don't want to hear them at the borough level. The lawyer, you tell the lawyer it's all bullshit. All right, we'll go to oath. The problem is, what happened to the right of a speedy trial? They'll wait and hold all those bullshit complaints for years and years, and then all of a sudden they want you to go to oath 4 or 5 years later.
Right.
Because they didn't have the time at the time.
Right. And they want to create a false paper trail.
Exactly. So they're creating a false paper trail for when you get down there in front of the administrative law judge, who, by the way, is appointed pretty much by the mayor's office anyhow.
Right.
Okay, so what chance do you have? But if you can't hear a complaint and give me a fair trial within a year, then it should be thrown out.
Absolutely.
Not that you just build it, and they could sandbag somebody 5 years later. And the best part is the foreman or the supervisor or the super or the chief that wrote the freaking complaint ain't even on a job anymore. So how do you cross-examine them?
Right.
I used to catch them falsifying records and complaints all the time. They hated me because I would dig and dig and dig.
And nothing ever happened.
Nothing ever happened. There was that kid in your garage, Bending Court, I think it was.
Okay, yeah.
One night, they sent him to, at the end of the shift, they want to send him to Q12 to do a relay. And he says, well, I didn't take my lunch and my break yet.
Right.
And, there's not enough time. He goes, I didn't take my lunch and my break. So he signed out at 8. He went there. He told them. They said, forget it. Then they sent him back. He signed back out of 12, back into 8. We got all the paperwork and the timesheets.
Right.
They gave him a complaint for refusing a direct order.
Right. They do the same crap to me.
But he went there.
Right.
And I had the paperwork. I got all the sheets. I got so much paperwork on them lying, and you live in it.
Absolutely. I got false complaints all the time, and I got to fight them. I got to go down to oath, and they lie. They basically just lie.
And here's the best part. Some people are kind of happy I got a little sick. They wish I died, but that's okay.
God forbid, man. I'm so glad you're good.
But I used to tell them, listen, you want to lie and write a complaint and take money out of a guy's pocket and food off of his family's table and hurt his kids and his wife and possibly lose his medical coverage, then you should all get cancer and die, you motherfuckers.
Wow.
That's why management hated me.
I just can't get used to you talking, man. I mean, it's like we have a business agent right now that wouldn't do anything for anybody. He doesn't even come to the garage.
Well, if you don't come to the garage, you don't know what's happening. Nobody can bother you or ask you anything.
Absolutely.
So if you got appointed to a position that you didn't deserve or didn't earn and you never lived, and you're related to somebody in the union hall, that's exactly what they want up there. That's
Mr. Beauvais.
Yeah, but you're right. But here's the thing. There's been plenty of people. I wanted to have Sheldon Dobie. They needed a business agent, and I'll be frank, they wanted a minority. And I said, Sheldon Dobie's the guy. All right, because they wanted him to handle Manhattan. He was out in the street. He'd been to every war, all the bullshit complaints. He was a regular street guy. And they didn't want to go with him. They picked the clerk from, I think it was Q10, Ronnie Pradis. See what I mean? They're picking people that they can mold and get to do what they want to do. Or the organizations, the fraternal organizations, got their hand
I know
in
they
it
have a
and
lot
gotta
of power
say.
because I have a friend that used to be a chief, and he tells me that they have a lot of power, those fraternal organizations.
Yeah, and they get their hand. So everybody's got to get their hand into the mix.
Yeah.
All right, and Sheldon Dobie would have been the perfect business agent for Manhattan. Well, I would have gave him Queens, and I would have went to Manhattan. I didn't care, but he would have been perfect because that's what they were looking for. But they picked another clerk. So let's think about this. We'll start with what I know. All right, Ronnie Pradis, clerk, and he didn't even know the rules. He used to call up all the time for seniority issues.
That's what my guy does.
Nicky Bauzo, the Bronx,
right?
Another clerk. And the best part was while he was clerking all that time, and the guys were staying out during the second round of layoffs that we'll get into later, he was out cutting lawns on the city dime, and nobody seemed to care. But he doesn't tell me management really had a problem with him as a business agent. Imagine you can come in, do your board, get you guys out, go cut lawns for your private accounts, tell you guys they got to stay out all day, and then do overtime at the end of the day when you come back.
Wow,
who's got it better than that? So that's we got him. We got 1, 2. Those are 2 guys that were right next to me or behind me. You got Jerry Marola at the time, right? He was a clerk for a long time, and then when it was convenient for him to come out of the office and go on the best route, all right, then he went out on a truck, but that was only for a little period of time because he knew the guy Oliver was retiring. Okay, so then we got him next to me. Then in front of me, we had Billy Corcoran, right, who's related somehow to Pete Scalatis, or his father and Pete Scalatis' brother were good friends, right? He was a easy pack operator in a GU, almost never loaded a truck.
Right.
All right. He's just always looking for a place to sleep. Next to him, you had
you got a whole of all-stars down there.
Next to him, you had poor Stevie Magano, who I really liked and I loved. You know what I'm saying? But Stevie had a lot of issues going on with his family and his kids and this and that. And he did the best he could. But you know what? He probably got passed over a couple times, so he wasn't too happy about being there.
Sure.
Mike DeFini left because he got passed over. He was a legitimate business agent. Then Joe Middleton was from the organization. He worked in community affairs, and he worked at 25 Word Street doing something.
Right.
All right, and then he got appointed. Then we'll shoot over to the left. Jimmy Parker was Harry's wife used to babysit him when he was a kid. And he knew, and Harry's family was from down there, so they knew each other. And Jimmy actually became a foreman for I think about 6 months and came back. And when he came back, they made him a business agent.
Wow.
And they told somebody else to leave. But Jimmy did load a truck legitimately. Jimmy was a street guy loading the truck out in Park Slope. Who else did we have? We had next to him, we had Nicky Pisano, was a good street guy, but he left. How is it 2 vice presidents leave under 1 president? You have vice presidents and presidents for 12, 15, 16, 20 years, but in the same 4 to 6 years.
Is that because Harry don't want to leave?
No, that's because Harry Harry wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing and letting shit happen, and these guys' hands were tied because everybody had to just let him do whatever he wanted to do. Whether what the issue was in the street or on the board, you know, it wasn't about them retiring. Just if you can't do your job the right way, like I felt I couldn't do my job the right way, you got to make a move. The only difference is I made the move the way I made, and they made the move the way they made. So those two guys, you know, Angelo DiPietro and Nicky Pisano, both resigned as vice president in the first 4 years or the first 5 years. So something tells you something's not going on right there. Angelo used to tell me, he goes, Philly, they're bringing people up in the union hall that don't even belong there. It's sickening.
Wow.
You know, then from there, here's the best one. They needed somebody in benefits because there was a lot of problems up there with Mark. So they bring in Frank Assisi, 25 Ward Street, his whole career.
Wow.
All right, PMD. Frank was brought up there to help people with GHI, HIP, different stuff like that because he knew that from being a PMD. But another tier 1 guy with 20-something years on the job, right, that's being brought in, another management guy being brought into the union hall.
Right.
Mike Beauvais, hands all over the Columbia Association.
Right.
All right, who's the president, who makes ABS.
And somebody was telling me when I was out of town that he's actually involved with the the Blasio administration, working for his campaign or something like that. And
he's in that whole left-wing Democratic club.
I don't know if it's true.
From South Brooklyn. Oh, no, it's true. From his mother to him. And that's how... He was another guy, community affairs.
Right.
That's what his job was. And then he helped with Scalatis' election, and they had to make him a business agent. You know what I'm saying? And nothing to do with doing the job in the street.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
Nothing is earned.
Nothing's earned. It's all about conniving, wheeling, and dealing. And then when they get up there, they're all the biggest bullshit artists. You know, here's an example. I had a guy transfer from the Bronx, and I says, how come you put in every Saturday for XWOP without pay? He goes, well, I coach Little League with my son's team, and I got to be there on Saturdays. I go, so why don't you put in for a chart change? He's like, what are you talking about? I go, you put in a chart change and you show the paperwork that you're the coach. They'll give you the chart change for so many weeks until you're done with baseball. Oh, up in the Bronx, we couldn't do that. We couldn't put in chart changes. Then there was another issue up in the Bronx with they were forcing guys on pieces of equipment, and they weren't shranking them. When if you force me on a special piece of equipment, I make the truck.
Why is it that place does the most weight and they get treated the worst? And why do they allow it?
You know, because, again, the business agents not doing their jobs, the men not being educated. I used to get guys shranked hours besides truck money. I'd get them truck money and hours, and I'd get them overtime, too, if they were deprived. Because if it ain't your pocket, you're really going to fight for it?
Right.
That's what it came down to. You know, here's one. There was a whole big to-do about facilities, you know, and Harry said, everybody better have their own facilities, especially the women. I'm campaigning. I'm in Q1.
Right.
And I'm talking to the girl. I got her number on my phone. I forget her name. And she's splitting a locker room with a supervisor and a civilian.
Right.
After Harry said, like 2 months before, we have our own locker rooms. We don't share them with nobody.
I went there out of town, and the place is filled with roaches. It's disgusting.
That stuff was supposed to be straightened out years ago.
Right.
And Dennis, as the vice president, told Harry, yeah, all my places are good. And meanwhile, I'm campaigning in Q1. There's a woman sharing a locker room with civilians in offices. You know, so I mean,
same thing in Q8.
And they lie to Harry. Well, Q8, there's supposed to be no women, only women in our locker room. Which, by the way, I pushed for. There's only supposed to be sanitation workers. There's supposed to be no civilians or officers in there.
Yeah, they wanted to put an officer in there,
but they didn't let her, right?
No, I think she refused. The officer said, "No, that's okay. I don't want to do it."
Yeah, they can't have that. We got our own locker room. But so what we were talking about before we got into that, we were talking about the disciplinary system. You asked me about the union hall, right?
Right.
So everybody up there is only worried about their pocket, their check. Nothing else matters to them. They're just getting paid. Like I said, money for nothing, checks for free.
Yeah.
That's what it came down to. You know, they had the balls to, a few contracts back, we got an extra 12% for specialized equipment, and they gave it to the guys in CTU.
Yeah,
and DVO. Was really the guys in safety and training should have been a part of that. Wow. Or even the broom guys, because that's a special piece of equipment. So they gave it to the guys in DVO. And Harry said, Norman Seabrook and the corrections officers, they gave it to the board and the business agents and boosted their salary by 12%. He goes, the next time around, we're going to look into this.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm thinking to myself, now I had been gone by the time the last contract was settled, so I still haven't seen a copy of it. I don't think anybody has a copy of it 3 years later.
Right.
So who got that extra 12%? Did they give themselves a 12% raise? Because they were supposed to expand that 12% program. They talked about giving it to the sand cops. They didn't want to give it to safety and training. So who got that 12%?
Wow.
You know,
and
oh, by the way, that's 12% that's pensionable.
Wow.
On top of your base pay. See how it just goes on and on and on. Here's one, bullshit turkeys at Thanksgiving, right? The first year I was down there, I couldn't believe it. A fucking $20 turkey. Guys are running down to their cars, stuffing 2 in for themselves.
Really?
Yeah. Not even worried about the guys in the fucking street. You know what I'm saying?
I think you steal a turkey.
You know, because you
make
count them, you put them in.
$150,000
you know,
a year. You're worried about a turkey.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. You know.
I can't believe that, man. I mean, I believe it, but I'm just saying, wow.
Who had to get 2?
Yeah.
They had to get 2. I didn't even want 1. Keep the fucking thing. You know. What else? I mean, I could just go on and on. Saturdays. Here's the best part. You had to work a Saturday every 6 weeks, right?
Right.
So guys didn't like working their Saturdays, so I would help somebody out and switch. I didn't have kids at the time. I really didn't care. I probably worked 1 or 2 that more for some guys than I should have, but that's the kind of guy I was.
Right.
You know? These guys would hate it. I go, you're off every fucking Saturday. You have to work 1 every 6 weeks.
Right.
And you're bitching?
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that. Do you remember? Well, I had a job. I was in the street. I had to work every Saturday, but I forgot. All these guys were clerks and this and that.
Right.
So I guess they were used to having their Saturdays off, you know, and not working.
Right.
Here's the best. I worked almost every day after Thanksgiving, my whole time on the job. When I first got up there, they didn't want... These guys all looked to be off the day of Thanksgiving. But meanwhile, I tell you, fuck you, you got to work. You got to work. The day after Christmas, you got to work. Here's the best. When the Giants were in the Super Bowl a couple years back,
right,
they were denying leave. They would only give so many guys off. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, I checked, and there was surplus all over. Mm-hmm. And I call Harry. Harry, I got surplus in every district. They're not giving my guys off. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of guys that still need off. Right. I got surplus to cover the off. That's it. They're not giving nobody else off. Really? You bother me with this shit? Yeah, because guys want off the day after the Super Bowl. The Giants are in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
But you know what? Anybody in the union hall could roll over, not show up the next day.
Yeah.
That was the term, roll over. That means you didn't have to report anywhere, you didn't have to sign in anywhere, you didn't have to do anything.
How often can that go on?
Oh, that would go on. There was guys that would just do that on their own, roll over.
You think that happens today?
Absolutely. Here's one other thing. When I first got up there, every Friday, every business agent had to be in the union hall, and they would tell us what's going on and update. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I would do my homework, right, my numbers and everything, or go over whatever trials I was doing at that time before things got really bad. And or, you know, so when Harry got up there, he would tell guys, come in on Thursday, because back then you didn't have direct deposit from the city, mm-hmm, so you'd get your city check down at the union hall. Right. He says, everybody come in on Thursday. So guys took that to mean every Friday they were off. Wow. And they wouldn't show up nowhere. You know, they'd say, put me here. Meanwhile, and I got all the paperwork again, copies, everything. I made sure I showed up everywhere. I made sure I signed in every day. I made sure you got to fill out activity reports for the city to let them know where you were, what day, mm-hmm, what times you were there, mm-hmm, all right, and what you did when you were there. So I would have all my activity reports and all my log books, and I would make sure they'd all drive, and I'd sign in at locations, and that's what I would do every day to cover my ass, because I knew I was hated.
Right.
These guys didn't even worry about it. They would just do whatever they wanted to do. They'd falsify those reports.
Why does Harry allow this? How could he not care about the men?
Well, listen, when you're making $300,000 a year, plus whatever kickbacks you're probably getting.
What do you think he makes being the municipal, head of the municipal?
He says he doesn't get paid from that.
Uh-huh.
So I got to believe that. But if you're making 200 and something from the union, mm-hmm, and you get a free car and an expense account, unlimited.
Wow.
And you get your city check, and money going into your pension on overage. You know what I'm saying? Because the tier 1 guys can still have the money go in, and they're getting 7 or 8% on that.
Wow.
You're not doing too bad. You know, does he allow it on purpose? He would get on guys and say, "Yeah, I know what you're doing."
Right.
He goes, "But it ain't gonna be me when they go through the records. It's gonna be you." Because one thing I say about Harry, he showed up every day.
Right.
And he was in that office every day. You know, and he made sure he was there.
Right.
You know. But all these other guys, I don't know, look the other way.
But who could check the records, and what would they check for to see that these guys aren't there? Or?
Well, you would have to check. It's easy. You got the blotters, which are in the archives.
Right.
Like every time I would come into a location, I have to sign in the blotter.
So there is ways to check to see that these guys aren't showing up.
Oh, absolutely. Then the activity reports that I mentioned, right? You have to fill out an activity report, what you did every week.
Right.
All right. And then you have to sign that. And that gets submitted with a card. And that goes to the Office of Labor Relations. But the Office of Labor Relations is run by the Commissioner of Labor Relations, who is appointed by the mayor.
Right.
So once again, if they're all in bed together, who's looking?
Right. Exactly.
You know, they had some balls. They talked about the corrections officers, the corrections commissioner using his car to go to Maine or New Hampshire, wherever he was going, Vermont. And I'm thinking to myself, the sanitation department's been abusing vehicles the whole career. They make night plow from the middle of November to the middle of April when it doesn't snow in November anymore. It doesn't snow in April anymore. So the bosses could take their cars back and forth.
Right.
From the second star chiefs down.
Right.
Well, that's all bullshit. Why don't they just get to use their cars when there's snow in the forecast?
Right.
All right, if I can get to work on my own car and the sanitation workers can get to work on their own car, why do all these bosses get to take cars home?
They're certainly making enough.
And here's one for you. When they put that lady Pardini into the Queen, she had to spend. We'll get to the whole advancement system, which is bullshit. But they make her the borough commissioner of Queens East in the summer, right? To say she has field experience, but meanwhile she has a summer home out in the Hamptons. So would you rather commute from downtown Manhattan every day to see your kids where they're out in the Hamptons, or would you rather commute halfway through from Queens?
Queens East, right?
You could say I'm on Winchester Boulevard and leave from there.
Right.
Which, by the way, I would do myself. I would make that my last stop of the day because it'd get me home earlier.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But think about that. So now you're getting free gas and transportation all the way out to the Hamptons.
Wow.
It's just the whole system's corrupt. And here's the best: with those cars, I got paperwork from I think the deputy commissioner of Belmonte at the time, and he said to everybody, "You have car privileges, make them count. All right." Make sure you do facility checks and equipment checks. Right. So after everybody would leave at the end of the day, you'd have some boss stop at a garage, right? Go up and down, look at the equipment, and write people complaints for garbage in the cabs or in the bins.
So we would pay for them to take their cars home.
Yes, exactly. So they had to justify why they were driving through. So they'd have to stop somebody and do a facility and equipment check. So there's only two problems with that. Remember I talked about two foremen in the garage sometimes? Yeah. I pull in with my vehicle, I fuel it, I clean it. Right. I show the foreman, he's supposed to sign my ticket, I go park it. Right. But there's no foreman there for me to do that. So I just fuel it, put the fuel on my card, sign the gas sheet, hand my ticket in. Who's to say somebody else didn't throw garbage in my bin? Right. But you're writing me a complaint that I'm not getting for a week later, so apparently, you know. Oh, yeah. Because I don't even know what's coming. Right. So just to justify that they're taking their cars. Yep. You know what I'm saying? It's just the whole system. I can go on and on. It just gets worse and worse. It's sickening.